Have you ever felt the world crash down on you in an instant? 1 minute, everything in your life is exactly as it should be. You have a strong bond with your family, a solid foundation of trust, and then, without warning, it's all ripped away. That's exactly what happened to me. Imagine your own daughter, the person you've loved, cared for, and protected with every ounce of your being, accusing you of something horrific. Something that shakes you to the core. How could this happen? How could she believe such a thing about you? What happens when the very person you trust the most turns against you? Well, that's my reality. This isn't just a story of a wrongful accusation. It's the story of a mother who found herself fighting for her innocence, her reputation, and most painfully, her relationship with her daughter. The legal battle, the emotional toll, the unspoken trauma. It all led to one question. Could we ever rebuild our bond, or had everything been destroyed forever? In this video, I'll take you through the unimaginable pain of being accused of something I didn't do, the truth behind the accusation, and the long, difficult journey of rebuilding trust after betrayal. Stick with me because you're about to hear a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about family, trust, and love. If you've ever been betrayed by someone close to you, this video is for you. Don't forget to follow and like, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Has trust ever been broken in your life? How did you move forward? I'll never forget the day everything in my life changed. It was supposed to be just another regular morning, the kind where everything feels calm, peaceful, and almost too predictable. You know, one of those days where you can have your coffee, scroll through your phone, and chat with your daughter about whatever nonsense comes to mind. But then, everything shattered. I remember looking at my daughter, her face tense, her eyes cold, as if something had just clicked in her mind. Her words, when they came, hit me like a freight train. She accused me of a crime I didn't commit. A crime I couldn't even fathom. I stood there, frozen, not knowing if I had heard her right. My own daughter, my flesh and blood, was telling me I had done something unspeakable. I could feel my heart race in my chest as I tried to make sense of it all. This was the same daughter I had raised with so much love, so much care. She was the light of my life. But in that moment, it was as if everything had flipped upside down. I couldn't understand how or why this was happening. She couldn't even explain herself, only repeating the accusation over and over, like it was truth, like there was no question at all. It was the beginning of what I can only describe as an emotional hell. I thought we had the kind of relationship where nothing could break the trust we shared. She was my world and I thought I was hers. But this was betrayal on a scale I never saw coming. And trust. It felt like it was slipping through my fingers like sand. How could I fight back when I was so blindsided? How could I prove my innocence when the person I loved most in the world was convinced I was guilty? I want to take you through how it all happened. I'll share everything, the confusion, the shock, the pain of having to prove your innocence to your own daughter. The fear that maybe, just maybe, something I didn't even understand had caused this rupture. Stay with me because this story gets darker and more twisted than you might imagine. And it's just the beginning. I'll never forget the moment it happened. You know, when life takes that dark, unexpected turn, and you feel like the world has just been flipped upside down. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking my coffee, trying to enjoy what was supposed to be a peaceful morning. My daughter, Emily, walked in, her face tight, eyes full of anger and confusion, and that's when it hit me. She opened her mouth, and her words seemed to hang in the air for what felt like an eternity. "Mom, you're guilty," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You did it. I know you did." For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to comprehend what she was talking about. What was she accusing me of? I didn't even know where to start. Guilt. Me. There was nothing I had done that could even remotely justify this. I had been nothing but a loving, supportive mother, right? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. She couldn't be serious, could she? But Emily was serious. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't angry with me because of something trivial, something I could understand or fix. No. She was accusing me of something monstrous, something that made my blood run cold just thinking about it. Her eyes were full of accusation, but what stung the most was the lack of any explanation. She didn't even explain what crime she thought I had committed, just that I was guilty. And when I tried to ask her to explain, to help me understand, all she did was repeat herself, her voice breaking with emotion but unyielding. In that moment, everything inside me froze. I felt this sinking feeling in my stomach, this intense, crushing weight of disbelief. How could she, my own daughter, think I was capable of doing something so awful? We had always been close. I had always been there for her, every step of the way. I stayed up late helping her with school projects, listened to her ramble on about boys, her dreams, her fears, and her hopes. We laughed together, cried together, shared everything. Or so I thought. The shock of the accusation was only the beginning. The emotional turmoil I felt in that moment was indescribable. I was left completely speechless, my heart racing with confusion. Why would she believe this about me? What had changed? Had I missed something? My mind was running a million miles an hour, trying to piece together what had led to this moment. But no matter how much I tried to make sense of it, the truth eluded me. There was nothing in my heart, nothing in my conscience that could explain this. And yet it was happening. I remember my hands trembling as I tried to reach out to her, to pull her into a hug, to tell her that whatever she was thinking, it wasn't true. But Emily, she didn't want to hear it. She wouldn't even let me get close. "Don't touch me," she spat, stepping back as if I were some kind of stranger. "You're lying. I know it." It was like a slap to my soul. The person who used to curl up in my lap for comfort now thought I was capable of something so vile. The trust we had was shattered in that instant, and I had no idea how to fix it. The more I tried to reason with her, to explain that this was a complete misunderstanding, the more distant she became. She wouldn't listen. She had already made up her mind, and there was no convincing her otherwise. The pain I felt from her rejection was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just that she was accusing me of something horrific. It was that she didn't believe in me anymore. She had lost trust in me, and worse, she didn't even want to hear my side. I was stuck in this bizarre, nightmarish loop of disbelief and desperation. I was trying to figure out how I had ended up here, how my own flesh and blood could see me this way, but nothing made sense. The more she rejected me, the more I was forced to question everything. Everything I had done for her, every moment we had spent together, every sacrifice I had made. The mother-daughter bond that had once been so strong, so unbreakable, now felt as fragile as glass, and I had no idea how to fix it. I remember sitting on the couch later that day, staring at the empty space where Emily had been moments before. Her accusations had echoed in my mind, each one louder than the last. She had accused me, but what hurt even more was the cold certainty in her voice. There was no room for doubt in her eyes. It was as if I were guilty beyond question. It was as if my innocence didn't matter anymore. She had already made up her mind. As the hours passed, I kept thinking about everything she said. "You did it. I know you did." Over and over again, those words replayed in my head. They became a constant echo that I couldn't escape. No matter what I said or did, she wouldn't change her mind. The more I tried to explain, the deeper the emotional rift between us grew. My attempts to clear my name felt like they were only pushing her further away. I was trapped in this nightmare where nothing I did was right. The fear of losing her, the person I had always protected, nurtured, and loved unconditionally, began to set in. But what hurt the most wasn't just the thought of losing her. It was the fact that I had to fight to prove my innocence to the one person who should have known me best. This was only the beginning of something much bigger. Little did I know, the accusations would spiral into a legal struggle, a fight for my name, my credibility, and most of all my relationship with my daughter. But at that moment, all I could think about was how it had come to this. How could I ever get back the trust one had lost? And how could I clear my name when the one person who mattered most in my life had turned against me? The worst part about the accusation wasn't even Emily's rejection. That was just the beginning. What came next was something I wasn't prepared for. The reactions of the people around me. The family I had trusted, the friends who had been there through thick and thin. I thought they'd understand. I thought they'd know me, they'd believe in me, and they'd see through the lies. But the truth, it was far messier than that. What happened next was a constant reminder of how fragile trust can be, even in the people you've known the longest. As the days went on, I tried to reach out. I sent messages to my sister, Karen, and to a few close friends. I needed someone to tell me this was all some horrible misunderstanding, that Emily was just upset and confused. But when they finally responded, I could feel their hesitation. The words they wrote were polite, but distant, like they were keeping their distance. And that's when I realized their belief in me wasn't as strong as I had thought. At first, Karen tried to remain neutral. She asked me to explain my side of the story, which felt like a relief. Maybe she still trusted me, right? But when I tried to tell her what happened, when I explained the whole thing, I could see her wavering. The doubt was in her eyes. She told me she wanted to believe me, but then she said something that crushed me. You know, Emily is so convinced. It's hard not to wonder if maybe there's something we don't know. Hit me like a ton of bricks. The people who knew me best, the ones who were supposed to stand by me through thick and thin, were now questioning me. They weren't standing by me. They were afraid to. How could anyone doubt me? I couldn't help but feel this intense, suffocating weight of disbelief. The betrayal I had felt from my own daughter was one thing, but now it was spreading to everyone else like a disease. The hardest conversation came with my best friend, Lisa. She had been there for me through every major event in my life. Weddings, births, deaths, you name it. But when I told her what was happening, there was this coldness in her voice that I had never heard before. She said, "I can't take sides without knowing more. I don't know what to think right now." And there it was, the doubt. That dreadful word. Lisa, who had always been my confidant, now felt like a stranger. Her uncertainty reflected everything I feared. What if people started to believe this lie? What if no one believed me anymore? And this wasn't just about my immediate family and friends. The accusations had somehow leaked into the wider circle. Social media, gossip. Suddenly, I found myself facing judgment from people I barely knew. The whispers at the grocery store, the sidelong glances at family gatherings. It was like I was a pariah. Everyone knew the accusation, but no one knew the truth. And worse, the ones who were closest to me weren't helping. They weren't defending me. They weren't even sure enough to support me. Felt like a cruel joke. I had lived my life with such integrity, such care, pouring myself into raising Emily. Every decision I had made, every moment I had spent, whether good or bad, had been with her in mind. And now, here I was, fighting not just to clear my name, but to hold on to my place in my own family. How could I explain the pain of being misunderstood by the people I loved most? How could I make them see me when they were seeing someone else? The conversations with family and friends went from cold to outright accusatory. My aunt, who had always adored me, looked at me with a different kind of judgment in her eyes. "People are talking, you know," she said, the words cutting through the air like daggers. "There's too much suspicion. You can't blame everyone for questioning things." She was talking about me, a wrongful accusation, as if I had somehow invited this disaster into my life. Felt helpless. I felt like I was drowning in this sea of doubt, with no life raft in sight. The more I tried to explain, the more I pushed people away. It was like every word I said only confirmed their fears, their suspicions, and their disbelief. The more I tried to fight back, the more I was becoming the villain in my own life. Every time I tried to talk to someone, it felt like I was repeating myself, like I was stuck in a loop where no one really cared to listen. Everyone was so focused on the accusation, on what Emily had said, that they couldn't even see me, the person I really was. The person who didn't deserve to be dragged through the mud like this. It wasn't about the truth anymore. It was about what people were willing to believe. And once the seed of doubt was planted, it grew like wildfire. It was painful. Excruciatingly painful. And that's when I started to realize how deep the impact was. It wasn't just about Emily anymore. It wasn't just about her turning against me. It was about the entire web of relationships I had built over the years. Shattered. The trust was gone, and with it, everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the people I thought I could depend on. As the days dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the tip of the iceberg. I could already feel the walls closing in, the distance between me and my family growing with each passing second. Emily was pulling away more each day. The accusations weren't just about me. They were about everything I had ever built with her. The bond we had was fading fast, and it felt like I was powerless to stop it. And yet, despite all this uncertainty, I still had to keep going. I still had to try to fix this, to make things right, even though every part of me wanted to give up. But there was no way forward but through, and I couldn't let my daughter's false accusation define the rest of my life. Not without a fight. The days following Emily's accusation were filled with a kind of emotional chaos I couldn't have prepared for. The disbelief had shifted into something much heavier. Fear. Fear of what might happen if I couldn't clear my name. Fear of what it would mean for my relationship with Emily. And even more so, fear of the possibility of being condemned for something I didn't do. The hardest part was realizing that now everything was out of my hands. The truth no longer seemed to matter to anyone, least of all to the authorities. What mattered now was evidence, legal procedures, and a courtroom drama I had no experience navigating. I remember the first meeting with the lawyer. I walked into his office, the weight of Emily's accusation hanging like a storm cloud above me. As I sat down, I tried to put on a brave face, but inside I felt small. I had never needed a lawyer before, never imagined that I'd be sitting in this chair, fighting to prove my innocence. The legal struggle ahead of me felt overwhelming. "I've looked over the case," the lawyer said, looking at me with a serious expression. "Your daughter's statement is going to be difficult to ignore. The charges are serious, and the longer this drags on, the harder it will be to prove you're innocent. We need to act quickly." The words were blunt, but they hit me hard like a slap to the face. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. No one was listening to me. Everyone was so focused on the accusation, and the deeper I went into this legal battle, the more isolated I felt. I left that office feeling a strange mix of determination and dread. It was like I had just stepped into a game where the rules were stacked against me. No matter how many times I repeated that I was innocent, no one was going to take my word for it. Not yet, anyway. I had to prove it. And proving my innocence meant diving headfirst into a legal system that felt cold and impersonal. It meant paperwork, meetings, and hours spent poring over documents that seemed to make the situation worse instead of better. The first few weeks were a blur. I spent days talking to the lawyer, trying to prepare for what I would have to face. Every conversation seemed to echo the same grim reality. The system wasn't on my side. The truth didn't matter in court. Evidence mattered. And at that moment I had none. I could only rely on my word, and that was hardly enough. With every passing day, I felt the weight of the wrongful accusation dragging me further into despair. I could feel the pressure building, the pressure of needing to do something, anything to prove my innocence. The worst part, though, was knowing that every step of this legal struggle was hurting Emily even more. She didn't want to talk to me. She wouldn't even look at me. How could I stand before a judge fighting for my name, knowing that the very person who had started all this, my daughter, was in the middle of it, unwilling to listen to me, unwilling to see the truth? It was like being trapped in a nightmare that just wouldn't end. I remember the first court hearing. I stood there in that sterile courtroom, with a pit in my stomach so deep I could barely breathe. The room was filled with people, strangers who seemed to be judging me, who seemed to have already made up their minds about me. The judge, the attorneys, even the bailiff, they all looked at me with this cold neutrality, as though I were just another case. I was just another person caught in the wheels of the justice system. Emily wasn't there, but her words were. They hung in the air. Her accusation was now a part of the court record. I tried to focus on what the lawyer was saying, but it was hard. My mind kept drifting back to Emily, my daughter, my flesh and blood, who had turned against me. I had no idea what had happened, why she was so adamant in her belief that I was guilty. But here I was, standing in front of people who didn't know me, fighting for my life, my reputation, my future. I felt so alone, so helpless. As the legal process continued, the emotional toll began to build. Every meeting with the lawyer felt like a slap in the face. They were trying to prepare me for the worst, telling me how to act in court, what to say, what to wear. It felt like I was being stripped of everything I was, reduced to just a defendant, a person who had to prove that she was innocent instead of being trusted because she was a mother. Felt like every part of me was being questioned. My character, my morals, my integrity. All of it was suddenly in the hands of a system I didn't trust, a system that seemed more concerned with procedure than with truth. And it wasn't just the legal process itself that was breaking me down. It was the toll it was taking on my relationship with everyone around me. People who had once been in my corner were now stepping back, uncertain, unsure of what to believe. And the worst part was, I wasn't even sure anymore. I felt like I was losing everything. Losing my daughter. Losing my friends. Losing myself. The worst moment came when the evidence was presented. The proof that everyone had been waiting for. I had to sit there in that courtroom as the lawyer for the other side laid out the so-called facts that seemed to point to my guilt. It was all circumstantial. Just vague connections that felt like they were being twisted into something that resembled truth. I could barely keep my composure as I listened. Every accusation, every twist of the facts. It was like they were slowly suffocating me. It felt like I couldn't breathe, like I was being buried under the weight of everything that was happening. What was worse was how Emily's accusations were treated as gospel. In court, her word held so much weight, and yet mine seemed insignificant. I was just a mother who had been accused of something horrible. I was just a name on a legal document, a case number to be checked off in the system. The truth didn't matter. The system didn't care about me. It only cared about what could be proven, and all I had was my word, and that wasn't enough. As the weeks dragged on, I started to lose hope. How could I possibly fight against something like this? How could I clear my name when no one would believe me? But deep down, there was a small part of me that refused to give up. I had to fight not just for me but for Emily too. I had to prove that I wasn't the person she believed me to be. I had to show her, and the world, that the accusation was false. The legal battle wasn't just a battle for my innocence. It was a battle for my life. For the trust one had built with my daughter. For the relationship that was slipping away with every passing day. But the longer it dragged on, the more I realized something. No one was going to fight for me except me. If I wanted to clear my name, I had to keep pushing, no matter how exhausted I felt, no matter how hopeless it seemed. I had to keep fighting, for Emily, for myself, for the truth. There's something about betrayal that cuts deeper than any knife. It's not just the pain of being wronged. It's the realization that someone you love, someone you trust more than anyone else, has turned against you. And when that betrayal comes from your own child, the person you've cared for, protected, and loved with every ounce of your being, it's a wound that doesn't just bleed, it festers. Changes you. And for me, that's exactly what happened. When Emily accused me, it wasn't just a single accusation. It was the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and family. Before this all happened, I thought our bond was unbreakable. I thought we shared something sacred, something that no one could touch. I had given her everything. As a mother, I had poured my heart and soul into raising her. Every decision I made, every sacrifice I made was for her. I had always put her first. And to be accused of something so vile, so unimaginable, by the one person I had done everything for, that was the ultimate betrayal. I remember the first time I tried to look past the accusation and see what was happening to my relationship with Emily. Felt like a slow, suffocating process. At first, I tried to reason with her. I tried to remind her of all the good times we had, all the moments that proved how much I loved her. I tried to bring us back to a place where she would trust me again. But no matter how many times I begged her to listen to me, to just hear my side of the story, it felt like the distance between us kept growing. The walls she had built around herself were getting thicker, and no matter what I did, I couldn't break through. Every time I looked at her, I saw someone who was no longer the daughter I knew. She wasn't the little girl who ran to me for comfort when she was scared. She wasn't the teenager who shared her dreams with me at night. Now she was a stranger. Someone who looked at me with distrust, with fear, with anger. And it broke me. There was nothing more painful than realizing that the person who should have been on my side, the person I had given everything to, now saw me as the enemy. But even worse than the way she looked at me was the way I started to look at myself. The more I tried to prove my innocence, the more I was consumed by the doubt and confusion that surrounded me. I couldn't escape it. The more Emily pulled away, the more I doubted myself. I questioned everything, every decision I had made as a mother, every moment I had spent raising her. What if I had done something wrong? What if, in some twisted way, I had hurt her without even knowing it? That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt the person who is betrayed. It changes them. It makes them question their own worth, their own character. Makes you feel small. It makes you wonder if maybe you were never good enough, if maybe, somehow, you deserved what was happening to you. I spent countless nights lying awake, my mind racing, wondering if I had missed something, if I had overlooked some subtle sign that things weren't right. Had I been too busy with life, too focused on work, too caught up in my own world to notice that Emily was slipping away? Or had I been blind to something darker, something I didn't want to see? It was like the trust that had once bound us had been shattered, and there was nothing left but pieces, scattered fragments of a life I no longer recognized. The emotional toll was unbearable. The pain of betrayal wasn't just the sharp sting of the accusation. It was the hollow feeling that followed. The emptiness that came with knowing that the person you loved most had turned against you. The feeling that you had lost something irreplaceable. Every moment we had shared, every bond we had built, now felt like a lie. I felt like I was drowning in this ocean of self-doubt, emotional turmoil, and despair. Every time I reached out to her, hoping she would listen, hoping she would believe me, it was like I was reaching for a lifeline that was slipping further and further away. The worst part was when Emily stopped even trying to explain herself. When she stopped talking to me altogether. It was like I was a ghost in my own home. She would go about her day, living her life as if I weren't even there. She wouldn't respond to my texts or my calls. She wouldn't even look at me when I entered the room. And I could feel the weight of her judgment. Her belief that I was guilty, that I was responsible for something terrible. It wasn't just her accusations. It was the silence. The coldness that hung in the air between us. It was the feeling that I was losing her, and I couldn't do a thing to stop it. It wasn't just Emily who had changed. The entire dynamic of our family had shifted. The trust one had built with my loved ones was slipping away too. People who had once supported me were now hesitant. They weren't coming to my defense. They weren't standing up for me. And in the silence, the whispers started. Friends, family, they were all talking. Talking about the accusation. Talking about what Emily had said. I could feel the eyes on me every time I stepped into a room. And I could feel the weight of their judgment. It wasn't just about the legal battle anymore. It was about my reputation, my credibility, and how quickly it had been torn apart by a false accusation. It felt like a public trial, one that I couldn't escape from, no matter how hard I tried. As the days turned into weeks, I started to wonder if things would ever be the same again. Would Emily ever look at me the way she once did? Would she ever believe in me again? Would the bond we shared ever be restored? Or had the damage been done? Had the betrayal gone too deep for us to ever repair what had been broken? It was like living in a world where nothing made sense anymore. I felt like I was walking through a fog, unable to see clearly. I couldn't even trust my own instincts. The person I had been, the strong, confident mother, was gone, replaced by someone who was unsure, who was constantly questioning herself. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger. The pain of betrayal is something that changes you. It makes you question who you are and who the people around you really are. It makes you feel like you're standing on the edge of a cliff, with no way to climb back. And that's exactly what I felt. I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, afraid of falling, afraid of losing everything I had worked so hard to build. I never expected the truth to come out the way it did. After everything I had been through, the sleepless nights, the endless anxiety, the constant emotional toll of not knowing where my relationship with Emily was heading, the truth finally came to light. But it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some big revelation that solved everything all at once. No, the truth crept up on me, piece by piece, like a quiet storm that had been gathering in the background. And when it finally hit, I didn't know whether to feel relieved or utterly betrayed all over again. Started with a phone call. A simple, unexpected phone call that came late one night when I was at my lowest. It was Emily, and for the first time in what felt like months, she didn't sound angry. She didn't sound cold or distant. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to know why she had done what she did. But I held myself back. I had spent so many nights crying, wondering if I'd ever get a chance to speak to her again. So, instead of responding with anger or resentment, I simply said, "Of course, sweetheart. Let's talk." She asked to meet at a local cafe, one we used to visit often when things were good between us. The thought of seeing her again after everything that had happened filled me with equal parts excitement and dread. What if this was just another cruel game she was playing with me? What if she was just going to accuse me of more lies? But deep down, I couldn't deny that I wanted this. I wanted to fix things. I wanted to understand. When I arrived, I saw her sitting in a corner booth. She looked so different. More mature, maybe even a little sadder than I remembered. Her face was drawn, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and uncertainty. I could tell that something was weighing heavily on her. She didn't even look up when I approached, and I could feel a tight knot form in my chest as I sat down across from her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was deafening. It was like there was so much to say, but neither of us knew how to start. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to believe it," she began, her eyes welling up. "I didn't want to think that you could be capable of what I thought you did. But someone told me and I just believed them. That's when it hit me. Someone had told her something. Something that wasn't true, something that had led her to make the false accusation. I wasn't sure who it was, but I knew it didn't matter. What mattered was that Emily had been manipulated. She had been lied to. The weight of that truth hit me harder than I ever imagined. The girl I had raised, the one I loved with all my heart, had been tricked. She had been made to believe something so cruel about me. And now, here we were, trying to pick up the pieces of a broken relationship that had been shattered by lies. "I didn't know what to believe anymore," Emily continued, her voice trembling. "I was just so confused. But I know now that I was wrong. You didn't do it. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have believed in you." As she spoke those words, I felt a mix of emotions flood through me. Part of me wanted to scream, to lash out at her for not coming to me sooner, for letting someone else manipulate her. But then there was another part of me, the part that had always loved her unconditionally, that just wanted to hold her and tell her it was going to be okay. The pain of everything we had been through, the hurt of her believing those lies, still stung deep in my chest. But in that moment, the most important thing was that she had finally come to the truth. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said again, her voice barely audible as she reached across the table, her hand trembling. "I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to believe the best in everyone, and someone took advantage of that. I can't imagine how much this has hurt you." Her apology was sincere, but it didn't erase the pain. It didn't erase the betrayal, the months of anguish, the loneliness of having to fight a battle I didn't even understand. I wanted to tell her how much it had hurt, how much her accusation had broken me, but all I could do was nod and squeeze her hand. For a long time we just sat there, the silence stretching between us. I could feel the emotional weight of everything that had happened crashing down on both of us. The emotional conflict between wanting to hold her close and needing to protect myself from more hurt was overwhelming. But in that moment, I knew that this was the first step toward healing. The truth was out. Emily had been misled. And now we had to rebuild what had been broken. But as I sat there, looking at my daughter, the truth was also clear to me. Nothing would ever be the same again. The damage had been done. The trust that had been shattered couldn't be put back together overnight. Even though Emily had apologized, even though she now knew the truth, the emotional scars left by the betrayal would take time to heal. There was a part of me that was relieved that I hadn't done what I'd been accused of, relieved that the lies had finally been exposed. But there was also a part of me that was furious. Furious at the person who had planted those seeds of doubt in Emily's mind. Furious at myself for not seeing it sooner. Furious that we had lost so much time. But in that cafe, in that moment, I knew something else. The journey to healing had just begun. The truth had come out, but the hard part, the painful work of rebuilding our relationship, was just starting. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick. But for the first time in months, I could see a glimmer of hope. I still wasn't sure how things would turn out. I didn't know if Emily and I could ever go back to the way things were. But one thing was certain. We had the truth now. And with that, we had the possibility of finding our way back to each other. The hardest part of all of this wasn't the accusation itself, nor the legal battle that followed. It wasn't even the pain of being betrayed by my daughter, someone I had loved and trusted with every fiber of my being. No, the hardest part came after the truth was revealed, the part where I had to pick up the broken pieces of everything that had been shattered, rebuilding the bond, restoring the trust, and finding a way to move forward with my daughter wasn't just about saying the right things. It wasn't about simple apologies or expecting everything to go back to normal. The damage was far deeper than that. The emotional scars, the trauma we both endured, didn't just disappear overnight. They needed to be healed piece by piece with care, time, and patience. When Emily came to me, apologizing for what she had done, the first instinct I had was to forgive her. But as much as I wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, that we would return to the happy mother-daughter relationship we once shared, I couldn't ignore the feeling that things would never be the same. The weight of everything we had been through was too heavy. The emotional toll on both of us was too deep. And no matter how much we both wanted things to go back to normal, we both knew that a new kind of normal was required. I didn't know where to begin. I didn't know how to rebuild the trust that had been ripped away so suddenly. I didn't know how to erase the feeling of betrayal that lingered in my heart every time I looked at her. Every time she looked at me, I saw that guilt in her eyes, the knowledge of what she had done, the weight of the accusation she had made. And yet, despite all of that, I knew that I had to try. We both had to try. Because I wasn't going to lose my daughter over lies and misunderstandings. I was determined to rebuild, even if it meant taking things slow, even if it meant starting from scratch. But where do you start when the foundation of everything you thought you knew has been eroded? How do you move forward when trust has been broken, and every word feels like it could be another lie? It wasn't easy. It wasn't smooth sailing. There were moments where I wanted to scream, where I wanted to lash out at Emily for everything she had put me through, for the pain she had caused. And there were moments where Emily wanted to pull away, to retreat into herself, to avoid facing the guilt she felt for her actions. We began, though, in small ways, small steps toward healing. I tried to show Emily that I was still there for her, even though everything had changed. I didn't want her to feel like she was walking alone. And so, I did what I always did. I tried to be her support, her mother, in the best way I knew how. But it was hard. It was so hard. Every gesture felt like it was scrutinized. Every word felt like it was laden with expectation. And every hug seemed to carry the weight of everything we had been through. I didn't know if I was doing it right or if I was making things worse. It was like trying to walk through a field of broken glass, careful with every step, afraid that one wrong move would shatter everything once again. There were moments when we would talk, really talk, and I could see the walls beginning to come down. I could see Emily opening up, letting go of the guilt and the shame she had carried around with her since the truth came to light. And then, there were moments when we'd slip back into silence, where the words just didn't come, where the trauma of everything we had been through would flood back in, choking off any hope of real connection. The silence was the hardest part. The silence that stretched between us like an impenetrable wall, making it feel like we were strangers, no longer a family. But slowly, as time passed, things began to shift. Slowly, the weight of the past began to loosen its grip on us. Slowly, we started to build new memories, new moments, new experiences that weren't colored by betrayal and mistrust. It was a process, one that felt like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but it was progress. It was real. And it was something I had to hold on to because the thought of losing her, of losing the bond we once had, was too painful to bear. Emily, too, was doing her part. She began to show me in small ways that she was trying. She'd text me randomly during the day to check in, just to say I love you or to ask about my day. It wasn't much, but it meant the world to me. It was a sign that she was still trying to rebuild what had been broken. But those small gestures didn't erase the pain of the past. They didn't remove the hurt that lingered every time we had a difficult conversation. They didn't take away the fear I sometimes felt. Fear that maybe Emily had only apologized because she felt guilty, not because she truly understood the depth of the pain she had caused. And yet, there were also moments where I saw flashes of the daughter I used to know. The one who laughed with me, who shared her dreams, who sought my advice. Those moments, though brief, were like glimpses of hope, tiny threads of light piercing through the darkness that had surrounded us for so long. In those moments, I knew that it was possible. Possible to rebuild, possible to heal. But it was going to take time. It was going to take trust. It was going to take effort. For both of us. For Emily, it was about understanding the weight of what had happened, of truly grasping the depth of her actions. It was about coming to terms with the fact that her words had caused so much pain, not just to me but to herself too. She had to learn to forgive herself. And I had to learn how to trust her again. I had to learn how to let go of the anger. How to stop seeing her through the lens of betrayal. Because as much as she had hurt me, I knew that holding on to that pain would only hold us both back. For me, it was about rediscovering my strength. Rediscovering the mother I had been before all of this happened. It was about taking care of myself, about learning how to heal from the emotional scars that had been left behind. I couldn't help Emily if I wasn't willing to help myself first. I had to find the courage to forgive, not just her but myself. I had to stop blaming myself for what had happened. There were days, of course, when it felt impossible. Days when the weight of everything we had been through felt like it was crushing me. Days when I wanted to give up, when I wanted to scream and run away from it all. But there were also moments, those precious, fleeting moments, when I saw the possibility of healing. When I saw that maybe, just maybe, we could make it through this. Maybe we could rebuild our bond. Maybe we could find a way to move forward together, stronger than before. It wasn't easy. And it wasn't fast. But it was worth it. Every tear shed, every painful conversation, every moment of doubt. It was all part of the process. It was all part of the journey toward healing. And in the end, I knew that no matter how long it took, no matter how difficult it was, I would fight for my daughter. 'Cause she was worth it. Our bond was worth it. And slowly, I began to believe that we could find a way back to each other. After everything I've shared with you today, I know that the journey isn't over. We've talked about betrayal, false accusations, and the painful process of rebuilding what's been broken. But here's the thing. Healing, forgiveness, and trust aren't easy. They take time. And sometimes they take more than we think we can give. But I need you to understand something. Just because trust is broken doesn't mean it can never be rebuilt. And just because you've been hurt doesn't mean you have to stay stuck in the pain. You have the power to decide how you heal, who you let in, and what you choose to let go of. The most important thing is to keep fighting, for yourself, for your peace, and for the relationships that truly matter. So I ask you, have you ever experienced something that broke you? How did you move forward? What did you learn about yourself in the process? You don't have to go through it alone. Take this lesson with you. Healing is a journey, and sometimes it starts with deciding that you won't give up on the people you love, and most importantly, you won't give up on yourself. If you found this story helpful, if it resonated with you, please subscribe and turn on the notifications. We've got more to talk about, and I want you to be a part of it. Let's heal together, one step at a time.